smiley group of people. This is so cool. I didn't know what we were going to find, and what we found was a room full of happy, shiny people. So happy pre-election, everybody.
Woo! Almost over.
We pray it's a happy post-election as well. My name is Kat Greenleaf. I host Talk Stoop on NBC and USA Networks. And thank you. Thank you very much. And this is our lovely panel. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Amy Keller Laird. I'm the editor-in-chief of Women's Health magazine.
Hi, I'm Emma Gray. I'm the executive women's editor at the Huffington Post.
Yes.
Hey there, I'm Dana Poitz. I'm the editor-in-chief of Parents magazine.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Williams. I'm the features editor at Essence magazine.
All right, so this all grew out of an initiative that had 60 publications come together for a campaign called Our Vote Counts. Who wants to tell us what that is?
I'll go there. Yeah, essentially just a group of publications that all talk to women of various ethnicities, various ages, wanted to galvanize the women's vote to make sure that everyone was registered to vote. Basically, we worked with the company Rock the Vote and had everybody create a landing page where we could ask our readers to go and show them easy ways to actually register to vote, just to make sure that the women's vote was really heard.
And there was also a, from what I understand, very fun bus trip to Pennsylvania to register young women and men too at colleges there so that they would vote. And you can still register in some states, not here in New York where we are, but there's still a lot of states where you can walk right up tomorrow and vote, even if you haven't yet registered.
And I think we especially wanted to target millennial women, because often millennials are a little bit apathetic during these elections. And I think we wanted to make sure that young women were really making their voices heard, because this election is going to affect, their lives for decades to come.
Why? How do you explain the apathy? Sorry, I went off book on that one. But
You're already off the script.
sorry, I'm sorry, but
I will say that I dug into this a little bit as we started to cover it in Parents. There are people who think that if you live in a state that's not a swing state, that your vote somehow doesn't matter. Not really true, but people are confused about the Electoral College and the process and how it works. And I think a lot of the time people just, like, everyday life gets in the way. And with young people, especially college students, for example, people move or new families move. So you might not be in the state where you were registered previously.
Yeah, and one of the things that Rock the Vote had said was that people just literally do not know how to register, and they think it's very complicated. So part of their outreach and part of our outreach was to make it as simple as possible.
do we have any numbers the night before the election on how successful the effort was? How many people y'all registered?
We do not. We are not sharing the numbers, but I can just say it's been pretty successful. And even when we didn't get people to register because they were already registered, we definitely made people aware of the need to vote.
Is everybody here registered to vote?
All right, good for you.
Awesome, that's what we like to hear. Okay, so how have each of your brands engaged with readers? How have you taken their pulse and then given them the content that they need and want around the election?
So one thing we know at Essence is Black women vote at a higher rate than any other group in America. That's across ethnicity, race, and gender.
Why do you think that is?
We just know how important it is. I mean, we didn't have the right to vote for so long. So much is at stake. 2012 really brought us out to the polls. That was a record year for Black women voting. Like I said, there's just too much at stake. So at Essence, we really want to make sure that we're hearing from these women all the time. So what we do is in 2015 and 2015, both in November, we did polls to figure out, you know, what are the top issues for Black women in America? And in both years, healthcare was at the very top of that list. So that's one way, you know, we're tapping into our social media, our Facebook, Twitter, really just trying to hear from these women because they are so powerful at the polls. We want to know, you know, what's driving them there.
It's interesting you did a survey. We were talking about this backstage because Parents also did a survey. And, you know, millennials are moms and dads now. I don't know how many of you in the audience are, but so we surveyed 1,000 millennial moms and found that healthcare was also the top issue in the election for them, followed by education and childcare, and 76% of them did not feel like the candidates were really addressing the issues that were of the foremost importance to families.
And for us, you know, obviously we're Women's Health. We're not a political magazine, but this year the election particularly felt like it was very relevant to many topics of women's health. So we went through a sort of exercise where we talked to 30 global experts about what would happen if, you know, the ACA was repealed, abortion rights were taken away or lifted, immigration, gun control. And based on what had happened in other countries, we presented our readers with sort of an analysis of what might happen here in the United States, just because there is so much happening right now that really relates back to women's health and wellness.
And I also think just the fact that we have a woman in this race has provided a really interesting lens for us to look at all of these issues at. On HuffPost Women, something that we've really paid close attention to is the way that both of these candidates are being covered in the media and the way that they're being spoken about. And we found that our readers were really interested in, of course, all of the issues on every side of the political aisle, but also the way that we're just talking about how a woman in a position of power should be viewed.
Would you say that the woman in question here has been treated fairly by the media? I'm interested to know why or why not.
I think that there's always a double standard when you're talking about a female leader. There's a lot of language that we use around female leaders, you know, pushy, aggressive, ambitious even can come off as a negative when we're discussing female leaders. And this just isn't just about Hillary Clinton. This is about the way we talk about women in positions of power across the board. So I think a lot of what's come up during this election has felt really true to any women who are in the workforce and have experienced any sort of subtle or overt sexism. And that's been a really sort of interesting side angle to this whole election.
And because you're all women-focused magazines, has it been a challenge to treat the man in question fairly?
I think listening to our readers, it's very clear where Black women stand on the election. I mean, we are thinking of things in terms of healthcare, criminal justice, college affordability, and if you're sort of straddling the line on those issues, our readers are very clear about where they stand. So we found some ease in that regard. But I do think that there's obviously, as journalists, there is a place for, you know, bipartisanship. We can't endorse or any candidate in particular, but a lot of the times we can tell from our readers that they really kind of speak for themselves in terms of where they lie on either side of the road.
Okay, so let's talk about what these issues are. What are the main issues at stake for women over the next 4 years, depending on who wins tomorrow?
I mean, I think as we've all kind of discussed together, healthcare is probably the biggest one amongst all of our readerships, just because, you know, Obamacare, the ACA was passed, there's lots of talk about repealing it, and when we looked into that, you know, basically before the ACA was put into, you know, power, what do you call it? Women were paying a lot more in healthcare insurance premiums. Women were paying a collective $1 billion more than men, and that's because women visit the doctor more, take more prescriptions, that kind of thing. But so if the ACA were to be repealed, we would go back to paying more. We would probably be having, you know, less women would be covered from insurance, less women would be getting pap smears. There's all kinds of ramifications of whether that were repealed. Now, no one's saying it's perfect and it can be built upon, but there have been a lot of strides that have particularly affected women and in some cases very specific subsets of women, Latinos and African Americans in particular.
Yeah, and I think reproductive rights as a whole is something that we found that our readers are incredibly passionate about, which obviously falls under the umbrella of healthcare. You know, as you said, the ACA means that women automatically their birth control prescriptions.
Do you guys want to break down what the ACA is in case people aren't familiar?
The Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, and one of the provisions in that law is that women's birth control prescriptions must be covered. And anyone who takes that prescription for years knows that can be a real financial burden if that isn't covered. So I think that's something we found that's a huge concern to our readers. Also, given that there is an open seat on the Supreme Court, I think that brings up a lot about the future of abortion access. And the two candidates have very different views on Roe v. Wade. You know, one wants to uphold Roe v. Wade and is opposed to the Hyde Amendment, which particularly negatively impacts women of color and low-income women and limits their access to abortion care. So I think that there's a really stark contrast here, and these are issues that women feel incredibly passionate about across the political aisle.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that point, I mean, access to abortion is such a key issue for Black women. While it is statistically true that most women who get abortions are white women, Black women are 5 times more likely to seek out abortions, and this has anything to do with education, access. I mean, you have states like Alabama, which only have a handful of abortion providers, and if those continue to be chipped away, you know, we find that women are going to seek out abortions no matter what. It's just a matter of whether they'll have access to safe abortions, and that's really key for us as well. So like you said, I mean, healthcare is really just at the top of our list, and it's very clear, you know, to our readers where the candidates stand on that.
I will just add, I don't know if you'll get to it, but the other area that was really critical for our audience was childcare. And in the United States right now, 37 states do not have, the average childcare costs in 37 states are almost double what is considered affordable childcare under the government's definition.
What is considered affordable childcare?
Like $10,000 a year, which is 20% of, you know, median household income in the United States. So, and what we have right now in millennial moms is it is the largest generation of working moms ever. So these are families where if there are 2 parents, they need 2 incomes. If there's 1 parent, well, for God's sake, she needs childcare, right? So affordable childcare is critical. And since our survey, each candidate has put forth their kind of platform for affordable childcare, and they differ somewhat.
What about other issues like gun control, like immigration? Have these played into the pages for you?
For us specifically, among millennials 18 to 35, we have found that criminal justice reform is key. In the last couple of years, the spate of extrajudicial police killings of Black men.
You planned it with
women,
this siren going by right now.
Right. That has been a #1 issue for Black female millennials, and if candidates don't speak about it at all, I mean, there's no way that you can just ignore this huge voter block. So again, people are taking no and taking that with them to the polls, but that's definitely been something at the top, along with healthcare.
And, you know, immigration sort of ties back into childcare in the sense that when we were looking at these 2 things, a lot of families in the United States are of mixed status. Some of the people in the family are citizens and others are not. So if something were to be enacted in which, you know, all people were deported, that would really tear apart a lot of families. It would leave a lot of women without, you know, the partner who's working or access to childcare. So it's an interesting topic for women.
The immigration card is such an odd one. Trump's wife and former wife are immigrants, last time I checked, and we're all immigrants to this country, pretty much. And so it seems like a real, let's see, I'm trying to be politically correct. This isn't something I'm used to doing, so give me just a moment to phrase this properly. How have your readers addressed some of the mixed messages from both candidates about what they say versus what they do? Is that a topic that people seem to care about?
I think perception is always wildly important, and I think, you know, our readers have been pretty clear. Of course, you know, we have 2 million Facebook fans on the Huffington Post Women Facebook page, so we do have a pretty wide diversity of political opinion, but overwhelmingly, I think that there is a very strong reaction to, you know, many of the more overtly sexist and racist parts of Donald Trump's campaign specifically. You know, our readers consider issues like police brutality to be feminist issues. So if you're looking, you know, at feminism from an intersectional lens, you're looking at the cross between, you know, there are immigrant women, there are women of color, there are low-income women. All of these issues cut across, you know, the demographic of women in this country. And I think it's just felt particularly stark given that we have some of these elements in one campaign and then a flawed campaign, but a campaign from, someone who could be our first woman president. So I think, there's a lot of emotions that are brought up specifically for women voters. And I think that's also why we've seen mental health care professionals report that women specifically are almost being traumatized by this entire campaign process. Sexual assault hotline traffic spiked after every single debate. Women who have been in abusive relationships are reporting feeling personally triggered by some of the ways in which Donald Trump speaks about women and about these issues. So I think it's been really fascinating as a journalist to watch this play out in ways that I think, the 2012 campaign did not feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, we had recently done a separate story about PTSD of rape victims. And so we had a partnership ongoing with RAINN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, and they had been sending us these stats about, just like you're saying, about people being triggered and the hotlines kind of going crazy after
the
this.
RAINN hotline.
It's the RAINN hotline. And because PTSD, I mean, in our study, we had found that basically women suffering from PTSD from rape sometimes had more severe PTSD than people who are combat veterans. So it's very real. And, we just never have seen this in a presidential election before.
Do you guys think this is a more emotional race altogether, simply because it's pitting a man against a woman?
I think it's really bringing sexism to the forefront, and we've thought a lot about this at Women's Health, and I heard President Obama talking the other day and say, really think about it. If you're a man who's against Hillary Clinton, think to yourself why. Just second, ask yourself one more time just to think it through. And I think people don't even realize necessarily that they have a sexist response, whether they're a woman or a man, to Hillary. And I'm not saying that means you have to vote for Hillary, but just the response you have, like we were saying, to the way she's dressed, to the way she talks, to her being ambitious. So I think it's bringing something to the forefront, again, that's never been here.
It's interesting. You've all read the comments of your readers, read the feedback, done the polls. For each of you, what's been the most surprising thing you've heard out of the mouths of one of your readers about the election? The most refreshing or surprising?
I can't really say there have been many surprises, honestly, because the issues that parents find are so critical are almost exactly the ones they found as critical 4 years ago. Things have improved, but education and the economy, the ability to get a good job and support your family were two of the top 5 issues for us, and those are exactly the same as they were in the last round and the one before that.
I think what's been not surprising but telling is kind of the sheer disbelief from our readers that this is where we are in terms of some of the rhetoric that has been used to describe communities of color and women. I think our readers are not at all confused about the America that we live in, but the idea that these sort of ideals are sort of shouted on this national stage and being reported on by national media. It's just kind of like, how did we get here again? How have we not progressed from, a historical past 8 years? So that, I think, has been a bit disheartening, just to hear the sheer sort of disbelief that our readers are just like, what is going on?
Are there any answers to how? Like, why are we here?
I mean, I kind of think we've always been here. It's the history of America. I think the Trump campaign has definitely given rise to feelings that have been in this country for hundreds of years. But it's still jarring. It doesn't take away from, I think, the raw, sort of unbridled, and I think we've been saying it's been emotional. I mean, I think this entire season has just been pure emotion, and that, I think, is a bit jarring.
Yeah, I mean, we had seen some stats recently from Fitbit that showed that people were sleeping less in these past month because of the election. Like, it's really affecting people.
Yeah, people are going in and having entire therapy sessions
feel like we're
to
having
work
one now.
through. Yeah, this is a mini one. But yeah, I think this is really affecting Americans across the board in profound emotional ways that we didn't see to the same extent, at least in the Romney versus Obama contest.
Okay, well, here's some Americans, some great-looking, smiley Americans. Let's open the floor to questions from you all to you all.
Hey, ladies. I'm from Florida, so I've only voted absentee through college. I've never voted in person, especially not in New York. How much time should I set aside to vote tomorrow? And
I bet it depends on what neighborhood you live in.
Murray Hill.
I
In general,
can't say I've ever voted in Murray Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I voted in various places. I will say when I voted in Brooklyn, I was there for like an hour. But now I live in the burbs, so it's probably going to take me 10 minutes. I'd say 30 minutes.
Yeah, I think the earlier you can get there, the better.
I was going to say that too. I think, the polls open at 6 a.m. The earlier you can be there, the better. If you try to go after work, everyone.
Oh yeah, don't go before work.
Right. And I have to say, if I was your boss, I'd be like, you just take whatever time you need.
Is your boss here? Should we?
Play this tape for her.
Oh, hello, ladies. I actually had two questions. I wanted to know if tomorrow, if Hillary Clinton does win and she goes on to be a great president, the different verbs that are used to describe women that aren't negative, but because it's described, it is a word using to describe a woman, it is considered negative. Do you think that her being a good president, if that does happen, will change the way people view women? And I also wanted to know about women who still vote for Donald Trump after all the things he said. Do you have an opinion on that, and do your viewers speak up on that?
I can
Great
take
questions.
that first one. Sorry, can you just repeat?
If Hillary Clinton was to become
Will it
president,
change the perception
Yeah.
of women?
Use the language.
I want to think yes, but I don't really think so. I think that we're going to see a backlash at first. The same way that electing Obama did not do away with racism. It did, I think, create representation that we didn't have before, and it was an important first step. This will sort of be the same thing, but we're going to see a lot of backlash towards women and women leaders, and I think it's going to continue to bring up more of the misogyny that we've seen throughout this campaign season, and it's going to kind of be on everyone, and specifically, on the media, to learn how to cover the issues in a way that both acknowledges that and also moves away from only focusing on her gender and treating her as a leader and being able to evaluate whether her decisions are the right ones or the wrong ones as a president, not as a woman.
I do think there's some hope there, though, for the kids of this generation.
Yes.
And maybe Dana will talk more to this, but having two kids who are 7 and 3 and just seeing my friends who have girls, and it's normal for them for a woman to be running for president. And so one hopes that in that generation, as they come up, they'll start to, it just won't be part of their nature to refer to women and men the way that we now do.
I think it's just going to take some time, and it's not going to be,
100%.
We wake up and Hillary Clinton's president and things have changed, but I think
Totally.
it's all part of that long process.
I think what this election has taught us is that women are not a monolith, and what we might assume might be someone's self-interest might not be. I was talking to a fellow journalist who was at a Trump campaign rally, and she met a Puerto Rican businesswoman there. And, she was very clear and sort of articulate about her reasons for being a Trump supporter. So I just think it sort of gives light to how diverse women are in their ideas, and I think that's what's great about this country. So yeah, that's.
I think the other thing is we live in this time of unlimited options when it comes to media and information, and yet at the same time, it can be very easy to isolate yourself in a funnel where it's like an echo chamber where you only hear what you want to hear based on what comes into your feed and your world. And so whether someone's voting for one candidate or the other, or whether somebody believes, there's been a lot of fact checks in this campaign, but there are a lot of people who believe that information that's been, shown to be inaccurate about whichever candidate and whichever election. And it's because, to a great extent, who you bring into your life in terms of your media choices can really be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Is there anything else from the audience?
Hi. To piggyback on what you guys just spoke about the media and having an effect on our votes, how does one perform their own political research so they can know the perfect candidate for them? Not because social media says this or my family says this. How do I know? How do I do my own research for my own self so I can know who I want to vote for?
Good girl. It's a great question. I think about that all the time, and I read everything.
I think you can start by going to both of the presidential candidates' websites and actually looking at their policy positions. And then you can go through, and there's bipartisan websites like PolitiFact, which fact check from a very neutral point of view. And you can then go through and say, okay, I want to understand more about this specific proposal that sounds good to me, and I want to check that out. Google that specific proposal and find more information. It definitely takes just sitting down and taking the time to do it, and it's tough with social media and the internet because there is so much information thrown at all of us all of the time, and it really takes, unfortunately, an amount of media literacy to be able to sort of sift through it all. But I think, yeah, if you can just start by actually going and seeing where do they stand on the issues that I care most about, and then do a deeper dive into those.
Absolutely. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for extra credit, you can think about kind of where the president does or doesn't have the ability to change policy. President Obama has done a lot of things through executive order, but actually the opportunities of a president in some ways are constrained, and you're really dependent upon Congress. So you might also think about making a list of the things that are important to you and then kind of cross-checking that against, it might be important that the candidate says this about this issue, but when it comes down to it, they have no ability to impact that.
And also look at down ballot races. I think this is something we really forget about often. We get obsessed with presidential politics, but so much of the legislation that affects our lives so intimately is done by our county and state representatives. So look at the ballot initiatives that are going to be on your ballot. Look at who, your congressperson might be or your senator, because those are the people that are making a lot of the decisions.
I think one big thing in this race is that we know there's a Supreme Court seat open, and that's not always the case during a presidential election. So I think if you look at also the issues that that the Supreme Court is going to decide, and then you look at, they often split between Democrat and Republican. So I think that's a thing to consider in this election.
Absolutely. And one more.
Hi, ladies. Thank you for coming today and sharing with us. I would like to know if, in the event that Hillary wins, do you believe, in the event that Hillary wins and Trump refuses to concede, do you think it would have anything to do with the fact that she's a woman?
We were just talking about this in the green room. I think it would probably have more to do with Trump as a candidate than who she is as a woman. But thankfully, concession doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't actually need to concede.
You don't have to admit that you lose to lose. You can just lose, and that's it.
Right.
I had the opportunity to hear the right of center pollster Frank Lutz the other night, and he said, someone's going to win, and on the next day, this country will be more divided than ever before. And this campaign has brought forward a lot of the divisions, a lot of the pain, a lot of the inequities in our nation. So on November 9th, people are going to be in a lot of pain. So please use whatever your platforms are to stir up some kindness, to stir up some understanding, and to move forward no matter who wins, because we are still in this country together. So I want to leave you with that. And everybody here works in the media or has a Twitter account. So we are all responsible for spreading the kindness. Thank you very much. Thank you.